Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This episode is on oil environmental impact, lost money, and future costs. Due to our last few articles on the oil industry, it came to my attention that we were not explaining the oil industry and environmental impacts as well as we could. And this leads us to this episode, and we hope to try to enlighten you. The idea that there is no environmental impacts that have to be considered is a falsehood and narrative that we would like to talk about in this episode. We do believe there are impacts that are important with oil pipelines. It is why the environmentalists are so opposed to it and the First Nations are opposed to it. And so is BC and the coastal waters a concern. In light of the Valdez tanker episode where there was a alleged drunk captain and he ran ashore and caused a very huge environmental impact, we can see where the BC coastline is a sensitive area. In such, I thought I would like to bring up the fact that we are a country that is democratic, and we have obligations to the people of not only our country, but around the world. Other oil-producing countries in the world like Russia, Saudi Arabia, AUE, Venezuela, and many other countries do not have the obligations to their citizens, the world health and impact, or impacts on climate around the world. They do not care because they are regime governments that answer to nobody, per se. And that is where we differ. And that's where our leadership in how we manage our resources becomes very, very important, and why we'd like to discuss more of it. We have to understand that the oil industry started in the 1950s in Alberta. It has been going on longer than that across Canada, but the Heritage Trust Fund was set up in 1975, 76. And since then, we have only got $30 billion set aside in dubious investments like dilapidated government buildings that are someday going to cost us money. And probably the only reason the wealth is maintained is real estate's quadrupled since the investment was initially put into these old building structures. And someday they'll have to be torn down and replaced. So what's that going to do to the Heritage Trust Fund and the assets in it? This is where I'd like to sort of focus our conversation in some of these investments and lost money. Cal, can you get into, we've already talked about it once, about some of these building investments with the Heritage Trust Fund. Can you enlighten us on some more of the Heritage Trust Fund?
Well, my understanding, it's not a cash fund. It's a fund with credited assets. Now, I gather there's a cash component to that. I'm just not certain how much is actual cash and how much is depreciating old offices that used to belong to the government that have been assigned as assets to the trust fund. I don't believe that information would even be publicly available.
Well, Smith put in a debt liability to the province to make it look like there was a contribution to the trust fund. We also have a $6.5 billion deficit for this year, which means we have debt associated with the operation of the government. And that is not acceptable, considering that the Heritage Trust Fund is years in existence and we only have 30 billion, and add on top of that the debt. This, in terms of business management of our assets, is very dubious when you consider the one simple fact is we know there's a couple $100 billion required to clean up abandoned wells across the province. Now, the federal government's put in $1 billion or $2 billion towards it, and that leaves Alberta and the federal government on the hook for this, and all we have to offset this liability is a $30 billion dubious heritage trust fund? Because you got to remember, the government's running at a loss. How much money is in the Norway trust fund, Cal?
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah, right. There's $2 trillion in the Norway fund, and that's mostly cash, folks. And Norway produces maybe a quarter of what Canada produces in oil, and they have 2 trillion. Now, I guess we have to break it down for, dummies for Alberta concept. $30 billion that is tied to debt is, there's $1,000 billion, hey, that's a nice cap. There's $1,000 billion dollars required to make a trillion. So if Norway's sitting with 2 trillion, that's 2,000 times 10 billion. And we only have 30 billion. Like, you got to compare apples to apples, folks. $1 trillion would go a long ways to the wealth of Canada and Alberta. And where did that money go? Oh yeah, it left. It went out of the province, went out of the country. And why are we allowing this blatant mismanagement of our resources and future concerns? Which is why I wanted to get into this episode a bit. The environmental impacts that could come back and bite us right in the arse. And that is something that is very, very important to understand. Why is Alberta shipping dangerous goods to other areas of the world? Why do they want to send it to Texas? Why do they want to send it to China? Why do they want to send it to India? Why do they want to send our oil offshore? Well, it's bitumen. Bitumen contains a lot of dangerous compounds, and it is a dangerous product to be shipping around the world. And there's some liability issues that can come back to bite us. If we are knowingly shipping a contaminated product out of our province and out of our country, we are definitely causing harm to the world. And that can come back and bite us in many ways. The fact that we can be bitten in the arse by lawsuits in the future is based on the principle that we have the ability to get more for our oil and make it safer for the world. The environmental impacts of shipping contaminated goods around the world. We are a democratic country with responsibilities and obligations to the world. Regimes that produce oil do not have any obligations to any of that path. Now, I was checking on the benchmark price for what we're getting for our oil today, comparing it to West Texas Intermediate. And just give me a second. I will try to bring up the synthetic crude prices. There we go. West Texas price today is $58.55 a barrel. And we start going down the list. Brent crude is $62.38, which is really nice. And we start getting down the list to Western Canada Select, $46.30 a barrel. Now that's over 25% less than the price received for West Texas crude. Now Western Select is a Dilbit, which is diluted bitumen source that takes some of the synthetic crude and waters it down to ship to the offshore refineries, whether it be Texas, where most of it goes, or other parts of the U.S., and to China or wherever the Trans Mountain Pipeline is shipping it. What that means is we're getting 25% less than the price of West Texas Intermediate. And synthetic crude is already a partially refined product where we get diesel and gasoline and byproducts from that are very important to our economy. So when we're shipping this bitumen at using diluent and diluting the tar to ship to these places, we're shipping a hazardous good. and it contains abrasives in the tar to wear the inside of the pipe out. It also contains acid, and the acid composition can wear out the metal integrity in the pipelines. And it can also wear the integrity of tanker ships as well. And this is a dubious issue because we get blinded by the fact that we are selling our product below fair market value. And who sets the price? Cal, you could probably tell us who sets the price that's being paid for Alberta oil.
The Americans.
There you go. We're not even controlling
people,
our own prices.
The people at the end of the pipeline control the price.
Exactly. And who sets the price for the transmission cost in the pipeline?
It should be the owner of the pipeline.
Yeah, which is usually a foreign-owned company, except for Trans Mountain, which is the only Canadian-owned one.
I think your point. I think your point, though, is that what we're exporting by way of crude from Syncrude contains other elements that are toxic.
Yeah.
A lot of oil. I can't think of any oil product other than margarine that isn't toxic. that isn't toxic, right? So the point is, how toxic is it, and is there a responsibility for the people who are shipping it to clean it up before they ship it, or is it the responsibility of the people who are buying it to clean it up once it gets to their end? And I think your point is, if you had a refinery in Alberta to further refine the materials that are being put in the pipeline, the value added would stay in Alberta, the pollution would not be exported, and it would be a greater return to the people of Alberta. I think that's the point you're trying to make.
Plus we get more for synthetic crude that we ship out. It would be close to West Texas intermediate prices or higher. It might be closer to Brent because it's already cleaned up. And that is very important when you think about it. Why are we getting 25% less in West Texas when we're shipping and diluting it with already refined products to be able to ship the bitumen? So we're getting screwed, hosed over, and less return on our money. And right now, I think 40% of the exports are synthetic crude, and of that, 50% is sent to local refineries in Alberta that is synthetic crude, and the rest is used to dilute bitumen and send it out down the pipeline. But my point, folks, is that smart management says that you refine your product to synthetic crude, or you take the residue from the synthetic crude production and you start refining it here for refined products instead of shipping that residue and ash or whatever they call it to other countries. And it makes more economic sense because we're getting zero in return for our oil because we've got $200 billion in debt liability and only $30 billion to show for it. We're running deficits all the time in Alberta for the government, and we're not getting healthcare or education costs covered, and that affects our taxes. So if you understand that we're getting hosed by the pricing, we do need to have more control over the industry here in the province, and that is the management issue with the government. I mean, this government's been in power, the Conservatives, for over 50 years, and I've showed you that $30 billion with some debt associated with and depreciating assets like building, with a $200 billion debt on cleanup, and that doesn't include other environmental issues if there's spills and what have you, or earthquakes and zombie well explosions in the future. We'll be liable for them, and we get really nothing in return except we're giving away our oil below fair market pricing. And even Mexico gets higher pricing than we do for equivalent oil. So that's of a concern. Like Mexico right now, Mexican basket is $55.39, which is only a couple dollars, $2, $3 less than West Texas Intermediate. Yet Western Select is $46.30. That's unbelievable. That's unfathomable that the provincial government would even allow such pricing gouging to our resources. And yet here it is. And they still subsidize in the billions to the industry for corporate welfare. What I'm really concerned about is the environmentalists. They want to stop this bitumen from going across mountains and terrain. And I think I agree with them in that part, because we can ship more environmentally friendly products through those same type of pipelines. Synthetic crude would not cause anywhere near the contamination, because the benzenes and toluenes and carcinogenics are removed from the product. Plus the grit and the abrasive compounds are removed, so they're not wearing the inside of the pipelines out. And guess what, folks? It's also cheaper to ship them because it's more, what's the word, viscous? They flow quicker and easier through the pipelines. It's not tar. So the viscosity makes a big difference on synthetic blends for shipping. It's much easier to ship through the pipeline. So there are so many advantages and so much money and profits to be rewarded for refining here in the province of Alberta that we should be considering it, because the last thing we want is the environmentalists to get hold of the concept that we are knowingly shipping carcinogenics and willingly hiding that fact. I mean, look at the asbestos industry and the kickbacks that came from that, or the tobacco industry that come back years later to bite them in the butt. And guess what? This can happen to us in the oil industry because we're discussing it right now. What are the deals we could be doing to mitigate the damages to the world? And why shouldn't we be shipping more environmentally friendly products to refineries around the world, like synthetic crude? There's no excuse for not doing it. And if you're going to deal with the indigenous issues and then First Nations, they're right. We can make a safer environment for our pipelines to be shipping, and they should hold Alberta's feet to the fire and make sure that we are doing that. And the federal government should be held to the fire and say, look, we cannot allow this type of product to be shipped when we can refine here in the province and ship much friendlier products around the world and make profits from doing such. And that's the thing. Norway, $2 trillion. Alberta, $30 billion with debt. Big difference in ideology, folks. So you got some, any of your usual data that you're pulling up off the internet?
Well, apparently, if the Alberta government had continued with Premier Lougheed's vision for the trust fund and the manner in which it was set up, the fund would be worth approximately $250 billion today and would generate $20 billion in annual dividends. So the fund now stands totally, right off the chart compared to what the original plan was. Now, the government has recently employed Joseph Lougheed to head a new corporation to oversee the trust fund's investment. Joe Lougheed is the son of former Premier Peter Lougheed. Now
They're called nepotism?
well, he apparently, he's a
Political association to get more votes?
well-known lawyer in Calgary, and he's
There you go.
sat in various councils and operated various funds in the past. So he was a director of the $100 million Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. So I guess he's got some asset coverage there. But as chair of the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corporation, the new oversight body, he'll have 25 billion of sovereign wealth to play with.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's still a long ways away from, let's see, we getting 25% less for our oil on average than we should be getting on the open market. So that 250 billion should have been, quite a bit larger if we got fair market value for our oil, folks.
But the 250 billion is not calculated on an assumption you get farm or fair market value. It's
Yeah,
calculated on the assumption that 30% of the royalties were reinvested into the trust fund.
right.
Even when when the Lougheed government went out, it was immediately lowered to 15%, and eventually there was no percentage, no
And
requirement on the government.
that wouldn't include the royalty holiday for drilling costs that was given by the Alberta government for the last 40 years either, where they
Yeah.
don't have to pay the royalty in, so it wouldn't come up on that percentage of royalty going to the Heritage Fund, because it really doesn't even come up on the Alberta books as how much money was gifted away for the cost of drilling. So
Well,
there's an issue.
of course, the Alberta government paints a different picture. What it says is from an initial investment of 1.5 billion, it has grown to 27.2 billion as of March 31st, 2025.
Right.
Now, the difference, of course, is it could have been 250 billion from the initial investment. So, I mean,
Then there wouldn't
obviously,
be all this teachers not getting proper class sizes and funds for teaching, and there wouldn't be an issue of nurses not getting paid properly or doctors getting paid properly, and you wouldn't have to pay as much to go to university because it could be well subsidized by just the interest that money should have made.
part of the problem is uh, their non-equity investments. Transferring government-owned property into the trust fund to say that it's an investment in the trust fund, or part of the value of the trust fund is essentially hiding. Uh, you could say corruption.
Yeah,
It's a lie on the face, right?
right. Well, in that capacity too, folks, if Alberta was acting responsible in its management of the resources and we had oil refineries here, what that means to your bottom line is two simple facts, and I'm going to point this out. Diesel costs for shipping your goods via truck across the country and bringing food to your door would be reduced because as a refinery, we would have a surplus of diesel, which means diesel wouldn't be an inflated price like right now. Before the last big price hike of oil, diesel was less than the price of gasoline for a reason. We had excess diesel on the market. Now we ship the product away to be refined instead of refining to meet our diesel demand. And there's a lot of price gouging at the refinery level. Now, that also means, folks, that gasoline prices at the pump would be much less for you. When a barrel of oil was $60 a barrel 10, 15 years ago, the price at the pumps was only about 40 cents a liter to 60 cents a liter based on a 60 barrel oil. And now we're paying $1.20, $1.30 a barrel. And the federal taxes are a percentage of the price. So where did all this excessive price come from? It's profit. And the cost shipping through private pipelines and all these added costs push the price up, and the profits have never been so great for refineries. And that's because Alberta brings the product back from outside the province in a lot of cases to supply the diesel and the gasoline. Now, we do have some refining capabilities in the province, but we're not meeting our own need to reduce the cost for shipping goods around the country. Then I'd like to point out Calgary. Now, Calgary is supposed to be the head office of all these foreign-owned oil companies. And in Calgary, we pay more at the gas pump for gasoline than anywhere else in the province. So if you go to Edmonton, it's usually 10 to 20 cents cheaper a liter in Edmonton than Calgary. And I call it the Calgary surcharge for the privilege of having offices of the head corporations of oil companies in Calgary. They take down $2 to $4 billion more in gasoline sales in Calgary, and I don't see the added cost of selling gasoline as the same as to the cost in Red Deer or Edmonton. And I often go to Red Deer. I filled up in Red Deer the other day, and it was $1.12 a liter gasoline. and here in Calgary it was 120 or whatever. So there is a significant difference, and I think it was 128 here in Calgary. But the point is, folks, there's no need for that. And when you have your own oil refinery capabilities here and you got surplus, and you can ship refined products around the world safer than you can bitumen, why aren't you doing it? And it would cost you less. You'd benefit right now on your driving expenses because gasoline would be cheaper, diesel would be cheaper. So that was one of the benefits of being responsible environmental business stewards of our resources. So when we're talking this environmental impact, we benefit from taking care of business in Alberta. We would financially benefit. Our cost of food and goods in the stores would go down because the diesel would be cheaper. We get higher paying jobs. They wouldn't be seasonal jobs. Refining jobs are year round, 24 hours a day. And that is better jobs. And our technical schools would be able to train people to fill these job positions. So it would benefit the local economy way more than shipping this product that's dangerous to the environment to other destinations to deal with the environmental risks. And keep up the fight there, environmentalists, because I think you're on the right track. And I'm surprised somebody hasn't said, hey, we're willfully getting rid of our toxic compounds when we should be dealing with it in Alberta. I mean, there is liability, and there should probably be in the future a lawsuit from the US or BC or wherever there's an environmental catastrophe from this bitumen. They should be coming back on Alberta and Canada saying, look, you guys are knowingly causing the problem when you could have mitigated it by developing and refining the products here in Alberta and in Canada more, and not shipping the dangerous compounds to other ports around the world.
Well, I looked at the revenue the province of Alberta published, and apparently the revenue from the Heritage Savings Trust Fund is less than the combined total of gaming and lottery and liquor.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So, and the other interesting thing is too, you remember um, Harper, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Do you
that's
ever?
Harper selling all our crown corporations, and now we're obligated that foreign companies or countries like China can sue us for anything in business that they don't like.
Well, the Harper now has been appointed to be the chairman of the AIMCO, they call it, which is the Alberta Investment Management Company. The money.
Didn't they just lose 1 some billion last year, and they passed a law saying they can't be sued because of mismanagement?
I haven't seen that.
That sounds like a Harper run organization. He sold everything off for Canada. He run up our debts, and he hurts us in the pocketbook tax-wise because the revenue from those crown corporations, folks, reduced your taxes annually. Now you have to pay more for those same services to a private corporation to profit, and your taxes go up. Oh, geez, that's great, man. Now we got this guy running AIMCO, and the Alberta government wants to take over a pension fund to run it at a loss. Where's this money going? Has anybody done a forensic audit of this AIMCO? Because I think when you start losing money, you'd best be doing some accountability to where this money was so wisely invested. But that's another rant. Maybe we got to do some more research on this AIMCO and the assets in it.
Well, what's interesting is that part of AMCO's assets is 108 billion in investments for public sector pensions, representing thousands of Albertans, including teachers, police officers, and municipal workers. And the funny thing is, the last thing the Conservatives want is municipal workers, and apparently they've just recently settled with the teachers. The obviously it's almost like letting the fox in the chicken house. You hope that Harper will do a good job. He's got an economic degree, so perhaps he will.
Well, if he had an economics degree that of any merit, he sure wouldn't have been selling off crown corporations that lower your tax obligations, people. And I question his understanding of business and economics. I'm sure he would say that refining oil in Alberta is a bad investment because his wealthy contributors wouldn't make money off it. And that in and of itself might be an issue to investigate.
I don't know. Basically, it's the problem of every Albertan. Your resources are running out faster than the money is coming in.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we've been 75 years of producing oil in the province in a significant way. And what do we have to show for it? A $6 billion deficit this year? And all the strikes, teachers, healthcare, they're privatizing everything, which means your costs are going up and up and up, and they're giving away the oil below fair market value. So we're paying more for diesel and gasoline products here in the product than we should be paying, and everybody's happy with the drain on your pocketbook. I mean, it's draining your pocketbook, so you're literally, the standard of living in the last 30 years has gone down in Alberta. You can't tell me the standard of living has gone up in Alberta. I mean, look around Calgary. There's no entertainment. Everybody's walking around with a frown on their face and dead up their yin yang, and they're one paycheck away from poverty and bankruptcy. And the courts, there's no legal system in the courts. There's no justice to people being victimized. They're being told now you're going to have to do no fault insurance. You're worthless under no fault insurance. You're not worth anything. Workers' compensation protects the businesses, not the injured worker. So you're just a liability to yourself by working in Alberta. You get injured, you get nothing, and you get to carry those sufferings for the rest of your life. And the government, on the other hand, gets these huge pensions that they get immediately after they leave office and live like kings on your dime. And we have to hold them accountable. Like, why should these people get pensions, in their early 40s and 50s? Why don't they have to wait till they're at a pension age? Or, like you said, 10 years after they're done politics at any age under 65, there's no accountability, and we're being mismanaged and duped into believing by propaganda that this is great for us. It's not great for us. It's hurting us in the pocketbook, and the costs, if you notice, the costs every year are going up more than the wages increases, and minimum wage hasn't gone up forever because they like to exploit you to make as much profit as possible. We need a living wage, number one. A living wage in Alberta is $26 to $30 an hour, minimum wage. And where is that? We're at half that. So the joke's on us, folks. Bend over. That's not a bar of soap they're dropping on the floor in front of you. That's your wallet book. They're putting your pocketbook in front of you and making you bend over and then giving it to you. Because at the end of the day, there's the wealthy and the rest of us. And the wealthy get all the benefits. Look at what they're building in Calgary. They're building a stadium for luxury suites. They're increasing the luxury suites so the rich don't have to sit with the peons. And they're offering the peons fewer seats, so you got to pay more to go watch a hockey game. And what did they say? Oh, you're going to have more concerts. You're not going to have any more concerts than you got right now. So it's free to the billionaire that owns it. The rich own that. stadium and the hockey teams and the contract to lease the building, and they're not even paying really annual lease. I think it's a loan repayment for the privilege of operating the building. So we, the taxpayers, just fork out more and more and more and more and more and more. And at some point, you're going to have to stand up, and that's where your votes count, people. If only 40% of people come out and vote, the other 60% are going, yeah, you can take money from my wallet whenever you want, however you want, and I don't care. Well, I care, but, you know, what can I say? I can only offer what I can offer, and I'm trying to offer you some intelligence. Start holding these people accountable and start doing some of your own research. You know, Google some of this stuff. Some of Google is actually accurate, some of it not. You got to use some critical thinking, folks. And if you do, you'll start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You have a choice, and you can make an impact. And protecting our environment is foremost. If we can produce less, sell refined product to the world that is cleaner, we're doing our part to the world to help deal with environmental catastrophes, climate change, global warming, and environmental pollutions that migrate all around the world. So let's be responsible citizens instead of being irresponsible and watching our pocket money disappear to paying taxes to enrich the rich. They don't pay their fair share by any means of imagination since Reaganomics came in the 70s, and you've seen the deterioration of the whole world as a result of it. So hopefully we get some attention on this matter. Did I leave out anything on environmental impacts and future costs?
Yeah, it's huge.
You know, well, it can be,
Yeah.
it can
Yeah.
break the province. I mean, if I was Trump and I wanted to take over Alberta, I'd just launch a lawsuit right now. He owns the judges in the U.S., and the courts in the U.S. can impose the collection in any country in the world. So I would just say, you know, you caused a pipeline break and you're responsible, and I'm suing you because the benzene is absorbent. You can breathe it in, and it's carcinogenic, really carcinogenic. And you're forcing all this product to be disposed of in Texas, and the landfills, and Biden made the mistake of allowing the coke and asphalt to be disposed of however in the U.S., and we're suing you for everything you got, Canada and Alberta, and it'd be trillions of dollars. And guess what? They take over our financial industry with an overriding royalty on everything we produce, and they set the price again, and Alberta gets nothing but the bills. And, you know, I can see that coming, whether it's a reality or not. You wait till there's a big catastrophe somewhere in the world that it is bitumen related from Alberta, and you will see a potential lawsuit that'll break the country, because we only have 30 billion saved from 50 years of a heritage trust fund, and we have 200 billion in debt for environmental cleanup on abandoned wells, which will turn into zombie wells in the future. We're leaking by the wells. And that reminds me, folks, you know, if there was some incentive for me to do it, I mean, we can't even apply for patents because the U.S. sets our patent, and it cost me $200,000 just to start the patent process. But I can guarantee you that the abandoned well process that they're using right now, from what I've seen and understand, is not dealing with the potential of a problem downhole and seepage in 50 years from now. And they're not sealing and abandoning these wells properly by my standards. And the patent process that I would put in place, guess what? I can't even afford to go patent it. And it would protect against zombie wells in the future. So where's the oil industry? Why don't you come knock on my door and I'll show you this technique if you pay me a royalty on the technique to actually protect the abandoned wells. Now, you heard it here first, folks. 50 years from now, when I'm no longer around, this video will be here, and I do have the process, and I may write it down somewhere in my estate as to how you should actually abandon the well. Now, my company, too, applied to deal with abandoned wells. We were told we weren't allowed to because only select companies were allowed in. Well, guess what? I own the intellectual property to actually ensure that we prevent zombie wells in the future, downhole and the seal off. So guess what, folks? I'm not giving it up unless somebody's paying the $200,000 to start the patent process on that technique. And guess what? I don't have the money for it, so it ain't happening. And you have to apply for the patent in the U.S. because Canadian patents mean nothing, zero in the oil industry, because everything's out of the U.S. and the U.S. courts do not protect against other companies in the U.S. stealing your patent in Canada. So, folks, you want to protect yourselves? Start answering to people like me. I mean, I know exactly what's going wrong downhole, and I know a cure for it. But I'm not telling anybody how it's done. I never told Cal how it's done. I'm not telling anybody. It goes to my death. And I, from the hereafter, I'm going to be laughing when one of these wells blow up and take half a town with them, because you should have listened to me now. And that ignorance and arrogance that you can put a oil company executive out of business because he tried to uncover fraud in Saskatchewan, guess what? It comes back and bites you in the ass. I getting tired of getting shit on as a businessman because we shit on locals and don't support our local business. I mean, one thing, and if you want, it's not just me, there's other people so it does affect our cultural aspects, it affects our bottom line, and it's still all related to Alberta and Alberta oil and the way we conduct ourselves in a greedy province. And that's where the name Cal Greedy comes from, isn't it? Calgary? Cal Greedy? And, I guess that's part of the problem in our culture now in Alberta. And time to wake up, people. Smell the coffee. Any comments from you?
That's a broad number of topics that you've covered.
Yeah, they make great shorts.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll have to elaborate on some of them in the future. I did want to put in that, those zombie wells, you should understand downhole technologies, and maybe you should patent proper procedures to prevent the downhole problem that's going to come from improper abandonment of wells. And right now, folks, I stand on record right now to say downhole abandonment is not being done properly from everything that I've seen and researched on it, and that's going to bite us in the ass in the future, and hopefully it doesn't cause any deaths 100 years from now. And a little knowledge and a little understanding could prevent that. And I think that goes back to the ignorance in the province of Alberta and dealing with issues here locally, and the federal government is also culpable for shipping and allowing the shipping of bitumen to foreign destinations without putting a environmental tax on it, which is another issue. We should maybe have an environmental export tax on contaminated goods leaving the country in case we do get sued. And there should be other federal taxes on the environmental aspects, because the contaminants go, they're talking dumping the water from some of the tailing ponds into the rivers. Well, if there's contaminants in it, it's going to Ottawa. So there are environmental impacts that we can find out 50 years from now we're wrong when we did them now. So I guess on that, I pretty well talked myself out. So remember, share, like, spread the word. Dig into your pocketbook and spend more taxes if you don't want to start acting on issues that can lower your taxes and lower your cost of living in the province. It's pathetic that Norway has $2 trillion in the bank account and we have peanuts in comparison and debt. So it's the debt that's the problem, folks. Okay, take care. I'm out.
Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.